The town learned how to forget people slowly, but it learned how to judge them fast. Maya felt it every time she stepped outside her apartment, the way conversations paused just long enough to let her know she'd been noticed, the way eyes followed her like she might steal something that didn't belong to her. She kept her head down, shoulders slightly forward, as if making herself smaller might make her invisible. It never did. She hadn't always been that woman. Once, she'd been the girl teachers praised, neighbors trusted, and friends called at midnight just to talk. But one mistake, one moment where life spun faster than she could control, had rewritten her name in the town's memory. People no longer spoke of her future. They spoke of her past, repeating it until it became the only thing they could see. At the grocery store, the cashier's smile faded when Maya placed her items on the belt. At church, empty seats surrounded her like quiet accusations. Even the air felt heavier when she walked through it. What hurt most wasn't the cruelty, it was the certainty. The certainty that no matter how hard she tried, no one believed she could be more than the worst thing they'd heard about her. So she stopped trying to explain. Maya found safety in routines. Same bus. Same diner booth by the window. Same time at the library every afternoon. Books didn't stare. Pages didn't whisper. Stories gave her something the town refused to offer: escape. That was where she met Eli. It was an ordinary moment, the kind people forget by evening. Two hands reaching for the same worn paperback on a dusty shelf. Maya's fingers brushed his, and instinct took over. She pulled back fast, heart racing, already bracing for recognition. She looked up slowly. Eli was studying the book, not her. He glanced over, noticed her retreat, and smiled, not the polite, distant smile people gave her when they felt obligated, but an easy one. "Sorry," he said. "You can have it." Maya shook her head. "It's fine. You take it." He laughed softly. "Looks like we both need it, then." She hesitated before nodding. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, then went their separate ways. That should have been the end of it. But the next day, Eli was there again. He didn't sit too close. He didn't stare. He just chose a chair across the room, opened his book, and occasionally glanced up with a nod that said, "I see you, not I know you." Maya waited for the moment it always happened: the narrowing eyes, the sudden distance, the silent calculation once someone realized who she was. She waited for him to leave early or avoid her altogether. He didn't. Days passed. Then weeks. One afternoon, he spoke. "You always sit by the window," he said casually, as if they were old acquaintances. "Is it the light or the view?" Maya stiffened. Questions usually came with traps. But his tone held no judgment, no curiosity sharpened into suspicion. "The light," she answered after a pause. "It helps me read." He nodded. "Makes sense." That was it. No follow-up. No probing. Just acceptance of her answer as enough. They began talking like that, small, harmless conversation stitched together by silence. Favorite authors. Music they played when they couldn't sleep. Places they wanted to see someday. Eli talked about growing up just outside town, about leaving for a while and coming back when life didn't turn out the way he expected. Maya listened more than she spoke. It felt safer that way. Still, something about him unsettled her, not fear, but disbelief. He laughed too freely. He looked at her too directly. People weren't supposed to do that. One afternoon, as they walked out together, Maya noticed the way a woman across the street stared at them. Whispered to the person beside her. Eli followed her gaze, then looked back at Maya. "Does that happen a lot?" he asked gently. She shrugged. "Enough." He frowned, not in disgust, not in judgment, but in confusion. As if he genuinely couldn't understand how someone could be treated that way. Maya stopped walking. "You should know," she said quietly. About me. Eli waited. They don't like me here, she continued. And once you find out why, you probably won't either. He studied her face for a long moment, then spoke carefully. I don't need a story to decide how I treat someone, he said. I just need how they treat me. Something inside Maya cracked, not loudly, but enough to let air in. For the first time since the world turned its back on her, someone had chosen to stand still and see her as she was, not as she'd been described. And she didn't yet realize it, but that quiet choice made in a library aisle, between two ordinary people, was the beginning of everything changing. Loving someone the world has already judged is a quiet kind of courage. Eli learned that quickly. At first, nothing about his connection with Maya felt rebellious. They talked, they walked, they shared pieces of themselves the way people do when they aren't trying to impress anyone. But the town noticed anyway. It always did. A glance here, a raised eyebrow there, small signals that said, be careful who you're seen with. Eli felt the shift before anyone said a word. His friend Marcus stopped inviting him to morning coffee. A woman he'd known since childhood crossed the street instead of greeting him. Even his sister's voice changed when she asked, casually, so, that girl you've been spending time with? That girl has a name, Eli replied. Silence followed. Maya noticed it too. She always did. She'd spent long enough reading the room to recognize when someone else was being slowly pushed to the edge because of her. You don't have to keep walking with me, she said one afternoon as they left the library together. Her voice was calm, but her hands were clenched in the pockets of her coat. I won't be offended. Eli stopped. Why would I stop? She met his eyes. Because this place punishes people for standing too close to me. He considered that. Then maybe that says more about this place than it does about you. Maya looked away. She wanted to believe him, but belief had betrayed her before. They began spending time together in spaces that didn't invite attention. Long walks at dusk. Quiet dinners at the diner during off hours. Conversations that stretched late into the night on park benches where the street lights hummed softly overhead. Eli never rushed her. Never asked for explanations. He sensed that her past wasn't something she refused to share, it was something she'd been forced to relive too many times. But the town wasn't as patient. One evening, Eli overheard his name spoken in a tone that carried warning. You know who she is, right? Someone said behind him at the hardware store. People don't change. And people like her? They come with trouble. Eli turned. People change every day, he replied evenly. You just have to be willing to see it. The man scoffed. You'll learn. Eli walked away with his jaw tight. Not angry, resolved. Still, the pressure built. His mother called one night, her voice careful. I've been hearing things, she said. I just want you to be safe. Safe from what? Eli asked. She hesitated. From getting hurt. Eli stared at the wall as he answered. I'd rather be hurt doing the right thing than comfortable doing nothing. Maya didn't hear that conversation, but she felt its weight the next day. You're losing people because of me, she said quietly as they sat in the diner booth. I won't let that happen. Eli reached across the table, stopping her from standing. You're not taking anything from me, he said. I'm choosing you. Her eyes filled, and she looked away fast. That choice comes with consequences. So does every choice that matters, he replied. What Maya didn't know was how lonely Eli had already become. The empty evenings. The unanswered messages. The way people stopped inviting him into their lives without ever explaining why. Loving her meant standing on the outside, and for the first time, he understood her world. Instead of resenting it, he leaned in. When rumors reached him, he shut them down. When jokes were made at her expense, he didn't laugh. When someone referred to her as a cautionary tale, he corrected them. "She's a person," he said. "Not a lesson." Maya watched all of it from a distance, afraid to hope. Afraid that one day he'd wake up and realize staying was too heavy a burden. One night, walking her home, she finally said what she'd been holding back. "I don't need a hero," she told him. "I need honesty. If this gets too hard, say so." Eli stopped under a streetlight, the glow casting long shadows around them. "I'm not here to save you," he said. "I'm here because I want to be." She searched his face for doubt. Found none. That was when Maya understood something new. Love didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it showed up quietly, took off its coat, and stayed while the rest of the world whispered outside. And though the town believed it was slowly isolating them, it didn't realize it was doing the opposite. In the shadows it created, something real was growing. Something strong enough to endure what was coming next. The tension had been building for weeks, though neither Maya nor Eli wanted to admit it. In the small town, secrets never stayed secret, and kindness toward the wrong person was always noticed. But no one expected the storm to come in broad daylight. It was a Friday afternoon, and Maya was walking down Main Street with Eli at her side. The sun hit the storefront windows just right, throwing shadows that danced like ghosts across the sidewalk. They didn't notice the stairs at first, too focused on their quiet conversation, but the whispers grew louder, sharper. "Look at her with him," someone muttered. "She hasn't changed. He doesn't know what he's getting into." Maya slowed her pace, her heart beating fast. She'd walked this street 100 times, but today it felt like it belonged to everyone except her. People stepped aside, nodded in judgment, laughed under their breaths. The faces she'd once tried to forget were all their neighbors, shopkeepers, former friends. Eli sensed it before Maya did. His hand brushed hers lightly, a silent gesture of grounding. "Ignore them," he murmured, though his jaw was tight. But the whispers turned into voices, and the voices into confrontation. A group of townspeople stepped directly into their path, cutting them off. One man, tall and broad, looked Eli up and down with an expression that mixed confusion and disgust. "You're really choosing her," he said. "After everything?" Maya's stomach sank. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the pavement, but something inside her stiffened. She was tired of shrinking. "I don't need your approval," she said softly, though her voice carried more strength than she felt. Eli stepped forward, his body just slightly in front of hers. "She is not your story to tell," he said, calm but firm. "And she is not the worst thing she's ever been through." A ripple of shock passed through the group. They weren't used to someone defending her with this level of certainty, someone who refused to flinch. "You don't know her like we do," the man snapped, his voice rising. "I know her enough," Eli replied evenly. "I know she deserves dignity, respect, and the right to live her life without your judgment. And if you can't give her that, then step aside." The street fell silent. Even Maya couldn't believe what she was seeing. The same people who had whispered about her, avoided her, and judged her mercilessly were now frozen in place, confronted with courage they hadn't expected. Maya's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but relief. She realized in that moment that she had never had to face this alone. Someone had chosen to stand with her, not to prove a point, but because it was right. Later, after the crowd dispersed, they walked in silence down a quieter street. Maya's hands trembled slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Eli asked. "For staying," she said, voice barely audible. "For not leaving when it would have been easier." He smiled softly. "Sometimes the right thing is also the hardest thing. And sometimes, it's the only thing that matters." That night, as they sat together at the diner in their usual booth, Maya allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in years: safety. Not the kind that comes from walls and doors, but the kind that comes from knowing someone truly has your back. Why me? She asked after a long silence, her voice fragile. Eli reached across the table and took her hand. Because you're worth it. Because you're human. Because someone finally has to see you the way you are, not the way the world wants to make you feel. Maya stared down at their joined hands. It was simple, yet revolutionary. For years, she had been invisible, dismissed, condemned. But Eli's choice to stay, to love quietly yet firmly, made her feel seen in a way the town never could. People will always talk, he said, sensing her thoughts. But their opinions don't define us. Only our actions do. Maya nodded slowly, the weight of years of shame and isolation lifting just a little. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she believed that perhaps the world didn't get the final say in her story. And with that realization, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Because even in a town full of judgment, love steadfast, patient, unyielding could still prevail. The storm had come. And for the first time, Maya didn't have to face it alone. Life didn't become easy for Maya and Eli. The town didn't suddenly embrace them, and the whispers didn't disappear overnight. But something had shifted, a subtle but powerful change that came from within. Maya began to realize that the world's opinion had never defined her, it had only tried to dictate how she should feel about herself. And for the first time in years, she refused to let it. Eli was always there, quietly steady. Not like a shield she hid behind, but like a companion walking beside her, sharing the weight without judgment. His presence reminded her that love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about choosing someone, day after day, even when the world seemed determined to push you apart. One chilly evening, they found themselves sitting on the old pier at the edge of town. The river reflected the pale moonlight, and the gentle ripple of water seemed to wash away the tension of the past weeks. You ever think about leaving? Maya asked softly, tracing circles on the wooden plank beneath her hands. Sometimes, Eli admitted, but I realized I wouldn't be leaving her behind. And that's not an option. Maya looked at him, the kind of gaze that could see everything he didn't say. It scares me, she whispered. People have already hurt me so much, what if they hurt you? He reached for her hand and held it firmly. Then we face it together. That's what choosing someone means. The days that followed were quieter in some ways, louder in others. The town's judgment lingered, but it no longer had the power to shape their lives. Maya started attending town meetings again, cautiously at first, and noticed that even when people whispered, she no longer flinched. Eli's unwavering presence gave her the courage to reclaim spaces she'd once avoided. At the diner, they became a familiar sight not just to each other, but to anyone who cared to look. Sometimes old friends would pass by, unsure whether to acknowledge them. Sometimes strangers would smile, sensing a rare kind of strength. But Maya didn't wait for approval anymore. She had already chosen her own path, and Eli had chosen to walk it with her. Their love deepened in the quiet moments, late-night conversations about dreams that seemed far away, early morning walks when the world was still asleep, and shared laughter that reminded them both that joy could exist even amid hardship. Yet, it wasn't all smooth. There were days when Maya's insecurities crept in, when old shame whispered that she didn't deserve this, that Eli's love would eventually fade. And on those days, Eli stayed patient, repeating the simple truth she needed to hear, I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. One afternoon, as they walked through a small park, a group of children ran past them, laughing. One of the mothers, a woman Maya recognized from the past, stopped and stared. Maya expected the usual judgment, but instead, the woman smiled faintly before moving on. It's strange, Maya said, glancing at Eli. Sometimes people notice without saying anything. That's all it takes, Eli said. Not everyone will change. Not everyone will approve. But we don't need them to. We only need each other. Maya squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of that truth sink in. It wasn't about convincing the world, it was about committing to one another despite it. And that commitment became a quiet rebellion, stronger than any words or protests could be. It showed up in small choices, holding hands when they walked through crowded streets, defending each other when whispers started, celebrating small victories in private. Each choice reaffirmed their bond and made the town's judgment less significant. Maya began to see herself differently, too. She no longer measured her worth against past mistakes. She no longer flinched at whispers or avoided spaces she wanted to occupy. With Eli's unwavering love, she discovered resilience she hadn't known she possessed. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maya turned to Eli with a quiet smile. "I'm ready," she said. "For what?" he asked. "To keep choosing this. Choosing us. Every day." Eli's face softened, relief and pride shining through. "Then we'll do it together," he said. In that moment, they both understood something profound. Love wasn't always about the world seeing it. Sometimes, love was about two people daring to be seen by each other, daring to stay, daring to choose again and again. And that choice, quiet, steadfast, unshakable, was enough. Years passed, and the town continued on its way, as towns do. People moved in and out, shops changed hands, and the seasons came and went with quiet regularity. But for Maya and Eli, time had a different rhythm, a rhythm defined not by the whispers of others, but by the steady beat of shared life. The world hadn't changed. Gossip still lingered on the edges of conversations, and judgmental glances occasionally met them on Main Street. But it no longer mattered. Not really. They had built something stronger than approval, stronger than the fleeting opinions of a town that never understood. Maya had grown into herself in ways she never thought possible. She walked taller, laughed louder, and allowed herself small joys she had long denied. She had learned that her past was not a chain to drag her down, but a reminder of how far she had come. Eli was always beside her, steady, unwavering, patient. He never demanded perfection, only honesty. And together, they celebrated the ordinary moments that most people overlooked, sharing coffee on quiet mornings, reading books side by side, walking hand in hand when the air was crisp and the leaves rustled beneath their feet. They had faced challenges, of course. Old insecurities would resurface like ghosts, and sometimes the memories of cruel words or dismissive stares threatened to pull them under. But they faced those moments together, leaning on each other instead of turning away. Each difficulty overcame only reinforced the truth they had discovered early on: love was a choice, and they chose each other every day. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the small hill just outside town, Maya spoke the words she had held in her heart for a long time. "You know," she said, her voice soft against the wind, "when we first met, I didn't think this us was possible." Eli's hand found hers instinctively. "I did," he said simply. Maya shook her head, smiling through the memory. "No, you didn't know me yet. You didn't know how much the world had turned against me, how many times I'd been told I wasn't enough." "I knew enough," Eli replied. "Enough to see who you were inside. Enough to know that the world's judgment didn't define you. Enough to know I'd stand with you anyway." Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound relief and gratitude. "You loved me when no one else would," she whispered. "And I still do," he said, squeezing her hand. "Not because the world says I should, but because I want to." They sat in silence after that, watching as the sky deepened into shades of purple and gold. In that silence, they felt the weight of the years lift from their shoulders. The past, the judgment, the whispers, all of it became a distant echo. What remained was something tangible, something unshakable: the choice to love, to stand together, to face life side by side. When they returned to town, it was with a quiet confidence. The world could look, could whisper, could disapprove, but it no longer had power over them. Maya no longer flinched, and Eli no longer worried. They had built their own world, one where love was enough. And in that world, they thrived. Maya pursued her dreams without fear, finding work and friendships that valued her for who she truly was. Eli supported her not as a protector, but as a partner, celebrating her achievements and comforting her during setbacks. Together, they became a living testament that courage and love could withstand judgment, and that choosing someone even when the world refuses to can transform everything. Years later, someone would tell the story of the couple who stayed together when the town expected them to fall apart. He loved her when the world didn't, they would say. But the truth was deeper than that. Because of that love, she learned to love herself. Because of that love, they both learned that the world's opinion was powerless against genuine connection. And the town? It never had that kind of power again. Maya and Eli, hand in hand, walked forward together, not as a symbol to be judged, but as proof that love steadfast, patient, and fearless was enough. In the end, they didn't just survive. They thrived. They chose each other, every day, and in that choice, they found freedom.